Hello and welcome to the Morning Watch on Love 101 FM. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. A special welcome to our listeners on love101.org. And if you're overseas and on the move, US listeners can access us at 712-832-8001. And if you're in the UK, 0330-332-6541. Or join us via the Love 101 FM app that can be downloaded from the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. You can also join us on Love 101 FM Facebook and YouTube Live. In our only watch today, due to the live broadcast of the National Leadership Prayer Breakfast, we ask, are we praying and fasting right? Are we praying and fasting right? And so we listen now to this morning's I quote.
I quote today, yesterday I dared to struggle, today I dare to win. That's Bernadette Devlin.
Great quote there. The first watch will be back after this break.
Bushfire mash up my business. 2 million in losses. I mean, no mention me house we burn down yet.
Protect the land. Respect the warning. The time by Jamaicans Against Bushfires, JAB, is
7:02 a.m.
Digicel at the winner's circle for the second year running. This time walking away with the award for Jamaica's fastest mobile network, best mobile coverage and fastest home fiber internet. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Digicel.
Didn't catch that? It's just the truth. Digicel is the fastest LTE and home fiber internet in Jamaica. Speeds you can rely on over and over again. Digicel. Better together.
From generation to generation, Jamaicans have depended on J&B Bank to make the pride and joy of providing a safe place for their families possible. Now, with no processing fees and no down payment mortgage options, you can open the door to your own sweet home, a legacy to hand to your next generation. Visit jnbank.com to get pre-approved today. J&B Bank will help you find a way.
Planning to sit the May-June CXC exams privately? Register with Overseas Examinations Commission before the late registration deadline, Friday, January 21. Visit our Kingston office or Montego Bay office to complete your application form or send an email to help@overseasexams.org.jm. Follow our social media pages at Overseas Exams for more details. Remember, if you plan to sit the May-June CXC exams privately, the late registration deadline is January 21.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint. Now, prayer and fasting have been acknowledged as spiritual disciplines of the church for years. And traditionally, especially at this time of the year, much emphasis is usually placed on the importance and impact of these disciplines. For this, the final in the series entitled New Year, New You, we are asking, are we praying and fasting the right way? And to assist us in this regard, we have online the Reverend O'Neill Brown, pastor of the Ebonyvale Baptist Church in St. Catherine. Good morning, my brother.
Brother Toussaint. And good morning, listeners to the Morning Watch. How are you, sir?
I am well. Good to have you, O'Neill. I hope you're doing okay.
I'm doing fine.
Great. All right. We're talking about prayer and fasting this morning, and we believe that you are more than able to address this important topic. And so I want to ask you, from the get-go, what is your understanding, Reverend Brown, of prayer vis-a-vis fasting?
Thank you, Brother Toussaint. My understanding is that prayer is communicating with God. It's a dialogue, two-way street, where we speak to, but we listen to God. And for me, hearing from God is the weightier dimension of that discourse. Because it is when we hear from God, our disillusion, our challenges are clarified, and greater insight is given to bear on our motives and intention. Now, when it regards fasting, fasting for me is primarily abstaining from food for spiritual reasons. And as the discussion continues, we will, discover the linkage between the two. But for me, that's what it is.
Yes. I am assuming it is possible to pray without fasting. Is it possible to fast without praying in a Christian context?
For me, fasting is not an end in itself. It's a means to an end. It undergirds the other aspects of your spiritual discipline. For example, it gives aid to prayer in specific ways. But as a discipline in and of itself, if you try to engage in fasting just for fasting's sake, then that is primarily just dieting. So I would not say fasting by itself without prayer or other spiritual discipline is an encouraged practice in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
But prayer can exist by itself, but not fasting.
And of course, there are persons who we have heard of over the years who have gone on hunger strikes.
Right.
Are they fasting when they do that?
No. You see, fasting is primarily for spiritual reasons, to communicate with God. It is not for selfish or self-directed motives. In the Old Testament, Isaiah 58, the Lord chided his people for fasting with ulterior motives other than seeking him. Fasting just to gain selfish objectives. And in the New Testament, Matthew 6 and verse 16, Jesus chided the religious leaders for allowing fasting to become just a public spectacle and show for selfish advancement. So we have to be careful that when we fast for our individual reasons, that we are not just going on dieting or hunger strike for advancing a particular cause, but not necessarily the cause of Christ. So hunger strike is different from fasting.
Okay, so let's go to the main purposes then. What, from a biblical perspective, what are or should be the main purposes, aims, objectives of prayer and fasting?
All right, let's be clear on two things here. Fasting is abstaining from food. And I want to start with that because the Greek word and the Hebrew word for fasting both speak to denying oneself of meal, food. But Hebrew, it is shutting one's mouth or closing one's mouth. Basically, that's the interpretation. And in the Greek, it's refraining or abstaining from food. Because nowadays you hear people talking about fasting for different reasons or using fasting from sex or other things. But it's primarily food. Now, the purpose...
Stick up in there, Reverend Brown, because I wanted to ask you about that. Because I've heard over the years, you're fasting, as you say, from television watching, you're fasting from going to to entertainment centers, fasting from intercourse. That's not fasting.
It is not considered strict fasting under the biblical interpretation of fasting.
Oh.
It is probably because, all right, take for example a statement made in 1 Corinthians 7:5 when the apostle says to the church that if you're going to abstain from sex for a particular reason, it must be
Right.
by mutual consent for the purposes of prayer and fasting. Now, I'm not debating the ongoing issue that the word fasting was added later and was not in the original manuscript. But the idea was that the apostle understood separation from these things as something separate from spiritual discipline itself.
Mhm.
And it is not strictly considered fasting. It is what just removing oneself from the pleasures around for the purpose of focusing on prayer and seeking God. But fasting is only used in relation to abstaining from food for spiritual reasons.
Got you.
Good.
Go
Now,
ahead. Mhm.
back to the question.
Yes.
The main purpose of fasting for me is to give visible expression to our dependence on God. When we fast, it's a way of denying ourselves the need for food to remind ourselves how dependent we are on God. That God is not just there to aid us in what we want to do. God is there so that we submit and surrender ourselves and see our need for God beyond our physical needs and sustenance. So, as the Bible put it, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. So it gives visible expression to our dependence on God. And also, it expresses one's yearning for a deeper and closer walk with God. So fasting for me is a way of acknowledging and affirming our dependence, our need, our yearning for God. And notice, Brother Toussaint, that I focus more on God than on the personal, individual need.
Mm-hmm.
Because the primary for me is God. That we're doing it for the purpose of seeking God. We're doing it for the purpose of reaffirming our need for God and not just our need for getting resources, things, and whatever else we may be focusing on, but a deeper walk with God.
Couldn't it be asked, are we not able to express those yearnings and dependence on God in a different way other than fasting?
Yes, we can, Yes, we can. But you will notice that from the Jewish tradition, fasting, eating has always been one of our basic human needs and primary human needs as eating and drinking. And if we can express a need for God by declaring that we need God even more than we need to eat, even more than we need to drink, which is one of the primary needs that we have. It is something that, magnifies that desire that we have and should have for
Tell
God.
you what, O'Neill, could you just hold that thought, please? We're up on a break. We'll be right back in a few minutes.
No problem.
Entrepreneurs, now you've got more support in your corner. Introducing Sagicor Bank Business Resource Center, where entrepreneurs benefit from free training in business management, financial support and guidance from pros, as well as research capabilities. Sagicor Bank, in partnership with the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, brings you this first center of its kind for small entrepreneurs to develop and grow. Let's help you take your business to the next level of success. Contact Sagicor Bank Business Resource Center today. WhatsApp 876-997-3745.
Get ready for the Woman Ignite Success Summit 2022. 2 days of intense worship and conversations about building kingdom wealth, leadership, marriage and relationship, mental health, finding purpose, and more. Featuring mental health expert Dr. Caroline Leaf, LA-based entrepreneur Heather Lindsay, plus worship with Rhoda Isabella, Alicia Taylor, Nadine Blair, and friends. Woman Ignite Success Summit, a life transforming event. January 28 and 29, Corley Auditorium, Kingston. Book virtual or limited in-person VIP tickets at womanigniteja.com. Powered by Digicel, Sagicor, One Group, Jamaica Observer, and Love FM.
There are a million reasons to want to own a home.
I want more space for the children.
I am tired of paying rent.
My wife and I want an investment. Go from future plans to keys in hand with an NCB mortgage. Get rates as low as 6.95%, 100% financing, and up to 40 years to repay. Plus, get the life insurance and home insurance you need all in one place. Visit myhome.jncb.com to get started. Conditions apply.
Welcome back to the Morning Watch. Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Dylan Toussaint, and in this, the first and only watch for this Thursday, because we are making way for the National Leadership Prayer Breakfast, which will be aired live on this station shortly. We have been looking at the topic, New Year, New You. And 2 weeks ago, we began looking at this topic by asking questions like, are we eating right? Are we sleeping right? Are we exercising right? Are we thinking right? Are we relating to others right? And this morning, we're looking at the whole matter of prayer and fasting. Are we doing the thing right? And we have online the Reverend O'Neill Brown, pastor of the Ebony Vale Baptist Church in St. Catherine. And before the break, he was telling us about the whole matter of fasting, looking at its purpose, and what are some of the things we should bear in mind. Reverend Brown, please continue your thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Yes. On the whole matter of what we give up for the sake of seeking God, eating and drinking would fall into the most important, I would suggest, as they are very strong survival needs. Mm-hmm. And it manifests that deep and that extensive yearning that we should have for God, even above that basic need.
So we can utilize other spiritual disciplines, but what you're saying, I'm understanding, is that fasting is one of them. It's one of the tools in the box.
Yes.
Okay, great.
And the most primary one, the most essential one, I would think. Okay. Along with prayer.
Great. Now, the types of fasts. Are there different types of fasts, and where and how do we find them displayed in the Bible?
The Bible identifies 3 categories of fasting. Mm-hmm. Both in Daniel, in Luke, and in Esther, Acts, and Kings. And they range from partial fast, which is restriction of one's diet or some types of food and drink, but not completely removal of food and drink, just adjusting what kind of food you eat and what kind of drink you consume. That's
so any specifications in that regard for the partial fast, that you shouldn't eat this type of food or you should eat that type of food?
Not really. You can identify what types you want to deny, because you have under that heading people identify the Daniel fast and other fasts, right? You can do bread and water alone. You can abstain from meat alone, or so forth. And it can also be identified as a section of the day rather than the complete day.
Oh, so partial fast is not only about the food, but the times as well.
But the time, yes.
Oh, okay. So the Daniel fast, in essence, as some people call it, is water a must?
Yes, it is. Because if water is not included, it is not partial. That would be absolute, which is the total absence of food and liquid. So you have partial fast, you have normal or complete fast, and then you have absolute fast.
All right, tell us about the normal or complete now.
Normal and complete fast. You'll see that in like Luke chapter 4, primarily verse 2. And it looks at the abstaining from all food, solid and liquid, but not from water. So once you drink water, it is a normal fast. And that is, you know, when you look at the temptation of Jesus and the fasting that he went through, it never mentioned that he did not drink water. It just mentioned he ate nothing for the period. And most times when persons are going on extended fast, it is normal fast. Because the human body cannot go very long without water. 2 to 3 days the most.
Okay, so the total absence of food, but water is included. Okay.
You see, the absence of food and liquid food, but water, is normal fast or complete fast.
Okay.
Because, you know, sometimes people blend up some things and drink, and
concoction.
That is considered food.
Okay. Okay.
So once you have water, it is normal fast or complete fast.
Is there a time frame to the normal fast?
No, you can decide how long you want that to be.
Okay.
And the Bible lists out from 40, 21, 7, 3, and even 1 day. But the time frame is up to you. It does not specify how long the fast should be.
Okay. And the absolute now is without water as well?
Without water. Complete absence of food, liquid, and water. Or liquid food and water, I should say. And the caution is for the absolute fast.
Wouldn't doctor... Yes.
You have to be very careful of how long you would decide to go on that particular fast.
Now, in terms of these 3 different types of fast that you have listed, Reverend Brown, is there any spiritual content to each of them that you go on the one vis-a-vis another for a particular crisis or situation or purpose?
No. It is not specific.
In other words, how do you determine which one you choose?
It all depends, you know, on one's seeking after and yearning for God. What it is that you are seeking and yearning God for. And there are times when God would initiate an individual or community to go on fasting for specific reasons. It can be for repentance. It can be for mourning. It can be for divine guidance. There are many different reasons. And it all depends on the individual or the move of God on an individual's life to engage in any particular one of these. But they have no distinct benefits spiritually based on the type you do, just the exercise of the fasting in seeking God itself.
Okay, any do's and don'ts in regards to fasting?
Yes, I would start with some primary ones. Make sure that you have a defined purpose when you're going into fasting. It's not just fasting for fasting's sake. Make sure that you have a biblical and clear reason for engaging in the fasting. And fasting should be done with preparation. Don't just jump into the fasting willy-nilly. Prepare oneself or the community before entering a period of fasting. Bearing in mind that you can be putting yourself in danger if you do not adhere to certain guidelines in terms of health and in terms of sustaining the body. Also, I would suggest make the focus of the fasting for the purpose of seeking God for divine reasons, not for selfish, self-centered intention or goals. Because then it would be dieting under the guise of godly reason. And it must definitely come with defined time restriction. How long, what period, and timing the fasting should last for. It should not be just going on and on and on without significance or structure. So I would take those things in mind. And the type of fasting that you will go on must also be careful, because in terms of the absolute fast, you need to make sure that we do not extend to a longer period than health would recommend.
I'm happy you mentioned that, Reverend Brown, because I'm wondering, should one seek medical advice before going into times of fasting, especially the second and third one?
Yes, I would suggest. Because, you see, as we engage in spiritual discipline, we must also remember that the body is also the temple of the Holy Spirit. And that our irresponsible behavior towards our body would be considered sinning against God as well. So,
yes, it should. And what about after the fast? What about after the fast? So you should just break your fast and then start eat everything that comes in your sight. You just fast today and tomorrow you are gouging with food. Any advice there?
No. Well, the truth be told, after you have gone on a period of fasting, getting back to normal eating habits is almost impossible, because your body is not adjusting to the regular food just yet. So you're not going to be craving the heavy food so immediately. It is a gradual phasing in. And I would suggest that we take that seriously. Listen to our bodies, because our bodies will have a lot to say about how we operate. It will not be yearning the heavy meal or even the greasy food as we have been used to, for those who eat greasy food, that is. So it is a slow phasing in of getting back to normal, if you want to get back to normal, or just segue into a healthier eating habit for those who do not have that kind of discipline to start with.
Yes. Yes. Interesting stuff, Reverend Brown. Believe it or not, we are out of time. But we want to thank you so very much for your time and your thoughts, sir, as we delve into this thing known as fasting and prayer. And we hope that persons have been encouraged to go into fasting and into more meaningful fasting. Have a productive and blessed day, my brother.
Blessings, my brother. And thanks again to the listeners for availing themselves to participate in this worthwhile venture.
Great. Pleasure having you. Well, listeners, that's it for today, as we have an abbreviated version of the program to make way for the live broadcast that was mentioned earlier of the National Leadership Prayer Breakfast. Thank you for listening to us. And for information how to get copies of this program, call our production department at 876-968-959627. This has been the Morning Watch. Thanks to our producer, Miss Kathy Gale, and our guests. Please join Mr. Stokely Marshall next week as he continues to look at the issues of the day. I am Dylan Toussaint, handing you back to Love in the Morning with Miss Parchment.
Now with no processing fees and